that you're responding to the moments, when you get there, the locations and what the weather's like. I mean, sometimes you imagine it being sunny in a scene and it's not, and you can either regret that or you can take advantage of it and find a way of using that sort of thing that comes to you by accident. So, and that's most of the way it is with movies anyway. And it's also what makes it wonderful, in that, there are times when, you're surprised in sort of a magical way, right? That's what I always like about it. Well, it really depends on the nature of the director. I mean, there are directors who come from theater who are not as interested in the visual side of it, and then there are people like Carol Ballard, who I've done a couple of movies with, who's very visually oriented, and yet in a lot of ways I have a lot of freedom working with him because we both, have a way of communicating visually. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I was just shooting something last week, and I was working with a DIT who has really sophisticated color correction, and we could sort of make some decisions. And I know there are a lot of people who like to do that, but again, it's another thing that I find really sort of false, because when you put a movie together, it's kind of like it's like an orchestral piece. It's like a symphony, and one scene follows another, and the scene that comes before it, creates a reality of the next scene and the next scene. And when you put a film together, you might have a cool scene that goes to a warm scene that goes to another warm scene, and you want to orchestrate the color and the densities and things throughout the movie. And until you have them actually in that order, it's really hard to know. And almost every movie I've worked on, with maybe one exception, the way the movie is put together, they'll take a scene from here and move it earlier because you need to know that information, and it's not necessarily the way it's written. So if you say, oh, I'm timing the movie as I go along, it can't possibly be true. I mean, you can have an idea of the way it should look, and obviously if you're shooting a sunset, it's going to be a sunset, but you do have a lot of latitude now too, so why not take advantage of the fact that you can orchestrate it? I mean, I just did I was just timing a trailer for a movie that I did, and in the trailer, we time scenes very differently than we time them in the movie, because they're just one shot after another that doesn't necessarily follow the same scene that it followed in the movie. So there are all sorts of things like that I think, ultimately are, reflect on how you decide a scene should look. No, but in this case, I was asked to by the director, and I happened to be around, so I did it. So, but again, I'm just talking about it just to illustrate how, the idea of actually timing it as we go along. I mean, it's a great, a great sales tool or a great vision idea, but it's and obviously just the way you like dailies to be timed nicely when they came out of the lab. You want them to look good, but it isn't really a final timing. It can't possibly be. Yeah, I mean, we did a lot of research. I mean, we looked at a lot of old movies and, old photographs. And, we also used a lot of NASA footage in the film, of some of the launches and everything. And one of the reasons we shot it in a 1:8:5 format as opposed to widescreen, which we kind of talked about, but since we were going to be using NASA footage, which was basically just flat 35 millimeter film, we decided that it would be better to shoot 1:8:5. But I mean, the big thing about The Right Stuff was exactly that, was to give the audience the experience of actually being there. And one of the interesting things that happened is that when we started, doing the visual effects for the movie, not so much the stuff, well, the stuff in outer space when they're floating around is one thing, which is much more sedate. But all the stuff of breaking the sound barrier and everything, we wanted to be really energetic. And, Gary Harris, who was doing the visual effects, was, doing a lot of motion control in those days, and just very smooth, like 2001 Space Odyssey, and it just wasn't feeling like, because in those days when they built a jet plane, it would be like somebody drawing it on a napkin and putting wings on something and giving it an engine and putting a guy in it, and he had to figure out whether it would fly. It's not like today where they have computer models and they know exactly what the fuel efficiency is going to be and how fast they can go. I mean, these were really by the seat of their pants guys, and so, it was a really dangerous field that they were in. There were a lot of people killed, and so we wanted it to have that energy. So when we saw that, I mean, Phil especially was really upset because he's saying, no, it really needs to. And so they started doing visual effects by actually photographing, planes just, models being thrown off of buildings, and, everything was shaky, and there was always visuals through other things. And, I think it gives the film a reality that is much more effective. I read a lot of things about, I actually had done a film about Valley Forge years ago when I was, right out of the AFI. And so I had done a lot of research about the Revolutionary War at that point. And this is sort of a different period in a different place. But, I was very much interested in sort of the way people lived their lives and the way they communicated. I mean, the whole movie opens up with, a rider with a letter, and, you think about today, and, to me, when you do a period movie, it's really important to, introduce the film in a way, which I really like about that movie, is it introduces you to that time period by seeing a horse rider with a letter and how exciting it was just to get a letter. I mean, now you get 500 emails every day. It's not as exciting, but in those days, I mean, your idea of the outside world came from letters from people from distant places. And so, even traveling from part of South Carolina, to the coast, and, to Charleston, and, those things was like a big deal.